Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started in just a few minutes just to make sure everyone has time to, grab a drink or something like that and hop on in. And if you could take a second to write into the chat of where you are coming from, kills two birds with one stone. We get to see that the chat is working and you are able to ask questions throughout the webinar. And maybe I can be nosy, see where you are, and be jealous that you have better weather than me right now. It's currently raining all day long.
Yeah, but you're
Um,
in Poland,
I
so that's
know.
that's awesome.
Oh, we've got California, we've got Florida, and in my mind, those are very sunny places. Oh, very, very wish I was there right now. But okay, wonderful. So good. Chat is working. Thank you so much. Um, all right, so I think we can go ahead and get started. So, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Elizabeth and I will be your host for today's session, Compliance to Advisory: How to Evolve Your Firm with CAS. So, if you're looking to move your firm beyond compliance work and into a more strategic advisory role, you're definitely in the right place. And we're thrilled to be joined by two incredible experts from Infinite Ties: Christine Triantos, owner of Infinite Ties and Infinite Advisors Incorporated, and Deneen Dias, co-founder and chief revenue officer at Infinite Ties. Christine brings over 25 years of experience helping firms build and optimize their CAS practices, and Deneen is a leader in driving digital transformation and scaling advisory services with the right tech and strategy. They are going to be sharing practical steps for evolving your firm and unlocking new growth through a modern CAS model. We're also going to be doing answering Q&A questions throughout this webinar. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat throughout the session. We will answer them as we go. And of course, stay tuned to the end. We will be sharing a $150 bonus code at the end of today's session. But with that all being said, let's get started. So, Denise and Christine, can you briefly introduce yourselves and your current roles at Infinite Ties?
Sure. Thank you, Elizabeth. So yes, Christine Triantos, been in this industry for 25 plus years. I try not to age myself, but started with BDO way back in 1996. And so back then, that's when we were doing audit and tax together, and then quickly evolved to like that whole controller of the firm, and then was an early adopter in our CAS practice, in the CAS industry itself too, which was about 15 years ago. And my business partner, Michelle, and I with Infinite Advisors like to say, because we were early adopters, we failed at a lot and we learned a lot along the way. And so if there's anything that we can help people not go down some of the same wrong paths we did, that's what we're trying to do. So long history of that. Super involved with technology. We're tech nerds, which is why this pairs so well together too. So and then we launched Infinite Ties, which I'll let Deneen kind of touch on, and she's our business partner within Infinite Ties.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Elizabeth, for inviting us on the webinar today. We're excited to talk about compliance to advisory. I've been in this space a long time too. I've been helping firms build a CAS practice for 17 years. It started when I was at CPA.com. CPA.com has a workshop on how to build a CAS practice, and it's all the pieces of the puzzle: how to staff for success, how to have engagement letters that include the cloud, how to have a tech stack. And that's when I first met Christine. Is very early on. She came to that workshop and was building CAS faster than anybody. So then she ended up facilitating the workshop. So she and I have trained probably thousands of firms on how to build a CAS practice. And it's really exciting now to start this company together, Infinite Ties, because it's kind of the gap that we're seeing missing right now in helping CAS teams upskill and move into the advisory space. So excited to talk more about that today.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And with that being said, and this new company and everything, what inspired your move from compliance-based work into advisory services?
Yeah, well, as a practitioner, when I was still at firms and doing kind of my own thing, it's where the industry is moving to, right? Every company needs more. They want more, they need more. And to be honest, they don't want to have oversight of it. They don't want to have it in house. So it's just like, what can we outsource? Where can we bring in experts? And what does that look like? The evolution, though, from that bookkeeping into the advisory services, that's what's key right now. When you think about technology and AI, even such as your product with Synder, I mean, all of the tech that's out there right now is really just catapulting all of that. And so that was really fun for me personally. And that's why I like shifted, because I was just so intrigued by the technology and the advisory services that we could offer our clients.
And I would say that's what we're hearing the most from our membership is right now they're still like drowning in the work, trying to gather the data and report on the data. They're still like drowning, like they're still doing that work. They don't have the time to get to where they want to go, which is the advisory. And so we know, to Christine's point, AI is going to come in and it's here and it's changing the way the work is done. So the faster these people push to get to that advisory space, the faster they're able to help the clients because it's what the clients are asking for. They don't really just want a financial statement anymore. They want advice on their data.
That does make sense, honestly, with the way everything is changing so quickly. And so why is now the right time for firms to evolve into this CAS model?
Well, if they haven't yet, they need to now because, as we mentioned, technology is changing. I mean, when you look at the traditional firm, 40% of the revenue comes from audit, 40% of the revenue comes from tax, 10% of the revenue came from bookkeeping.
Mm.
And that shift has happened where the fastest growing new revenue source for firms is CAS, which is great because, quite frankly, audit and tax are kind of flat. And so their money makers is changing for the traditional firm. And so everyone's running to CAS because they see that that's the future. They see that that's where the revenue is. But building a CAS practice is so different than what a firm is used to from tax and audit. And so if they haven't evolved to this advisory space in the CAS side, I would say it is the future of your firm. So it's time to get started.
Okay, definitely makes sense. And so if someone's newer to this model, how do you define CAS beyond this acronym that it has?
Yeah. Well, so when I started back in '09, it was client accounting services. And then through like the 2010s, we were seeing it be CAAS, client accounting and advisory services. And I would say now in the 2020s, and certainly the work that Christine and I do with firms, we now call it client advisory services. So everybody defines it differently, but that's the evolution that we've seen, and we truly believe it is now the client advisory services.
And I think that's an industry standard, right? I mean, I think it's now evolving to the client advisory services. That's the direction of the AICPA, CPA.com as well. And so really just trying to make it so that everybody knows what it is, like an audit or a tax, right? Then you just have insert CAS. So that's really the goal, is to just create that that everybody knows what that means. That's within an accounting firm, and even clients start to understand the terminology.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. It should be accessible for everyone. And so, with that being said, what are the foundational changes a firm should make internally to begin shifting from compliance to advisory? How does that work in a sense?
Yep. So let's see. Like when we talk a lot about this, and we do consult with firms on this, but it's the realigning incentives. It's really hard. We try to come in and change the psychology of firms, because what they try to do with CAS is run it like a traditional audit and tax practice, and it's vastly different. Different in that it's, we're getting out of the compliance, we're getting more into the proactive, financial guidance, advisory, but also it's daily, weekly service, right? It's like where you are on all the time with these clients rather than planning or quarterly or annual services. So it's realigning those incentives with that. And I want to go into this just a little bit because I'm like on this soapbox lately with how we're consulting with firms around realigning those incentives. Is that it's, yes, we're never going to get away from tracking billable hours. We need to track the billable hours. However, with CAS, it's highly incentivized, and the motivation is to create efficiency through technology and offshoring. And if we don't align those goals and incentives for these CAS teams, it's just it doesn't promote them trying to implement and learn all of that, right? So they can't be tied. And so we tell firms, change what that looks like. Yes, you're still going to have goals. Yes, you're still going to have billable goals. But how are you realigning those incentives so that you are creating a really good structured CAS practice where they are learning tech, implementing tech, and then pushing the work down where they need to. So along with some of these as well, investing in technology, that's a huge piece. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's a standard tech stack, right? So you have your standard tech stack, and then you have the tech stack that you're going to go into within whatever industry niches that you're servicing. But that is an investment in time for training and creating, that synergy with the team of how they're going to deliver those services via a lot of these tech products. And we'll touch on a lot of these things throughout this webinar as well, but building governance rituals and developing an advisory training plan. This is huge, right? Because it's explaining to not only your partners, but also your team and to your clients how it's different. How is this different than bookkeeping? What is this advisory, service offerings, and what does that look like? And it can start small, but that's also what we like Deneen was saying, we're filling the gap with Infinite Ties is that training, because we found in the industry that so much of the training is really built around audit and tax and has not been truly specific to CAS. And so that's really where we're trying to come in and help people. But all firms just need to just figure out how they're developing that advisory training plan, because it is different. It is a different model.
And we hear that often when we're talking to our membership and talking to CAS leaders, and Christine says this all the time, and it resonates with me, is when we talk to them, they feel like they're on an island all by themselves. And oftentimes, like the managing partner will say, we want to build CAS, but they don't really understand what that means. And the audit partner doesn't, and the tax partner doesn't. And so these CAS folks are like, we're all by ourselves, like trying to build something from scratch. And so when they talk to us, they're like, oh, you get it. Because a lot of it is a mindset shift. It's so different. The technology is different. The talent is different. The training is different. And there's just not a ton of places to go for CAS talent to really get supported.
Yeah.
So I would say when the firm decides that, they need to invest. They need to invest in technology. They need to invest in different talent. They have to invest in different processes and that's a big internal shift for firms that we can't recommend enough.
Yeah, I completely agree how, you need a solid foundation before you do anything like, such a
No.
big overhaul for sure. So, with that being said, how does the CAS model reframe the client accountant relationship in a long-term engagement? How does that go?
Yeah, so it's kind of like that transition, right? And so, and for firms that are either just starting CAS, or if they've been in CAS for a long time, they're like, we kind of just took all of our write-up bookkeeping clients and then tried to like put them in this, CAS space. And that's not really how you should look at this. So it's like, what are we offering? What are we going to offer? What are the differences of that advisory? And when we always just tell firms, just take whatever you have in place and just right now for a thought process, throw it out the window. And how would you design this if you were to start this over again tomorrow? And let's really look at what that means for a firm, because a lot of the write-up bookkeeping clients are coming over. They're quarterly, they're ad hoc. It's just, could be just for tax return purposes or tax planning. And so it's really just shifting from to the two, for internally with your teams and for all of the partner group and then with the clients. Transitioning to advisor, we've talked about that too. What does that look like for your clients? You're going to be with them on a daily, you're the trusted advisor, you're monitoring cash flow, you're flagging risks in real time, you're guiding their decisions, all of those things that are so different. The proactive and not reactive, that is huge, right? Because when you think about CAS, and yes, you're coming in with month-end close and providing financials, but it's really the proactive piece that all of these clients are looking for. And it's the telling the story. It's not, here's what happened. It's, here's what we've seen. Therefore, here are the things that you want to start to think about for the future, and being, proactive from that standpoint. So it's, providing and presenting solutions for them to make quicker decisions, which like that's what it is to me too. So it's really, really focusing on that proactive. I think that is really, really important.
Well, and this is what clients are hungry for. It's easy for them to get a bookkeeper. They know their books are a mess, right? That's really easy to hire someone next door for $50 an hour to clean up their books. But what they're hungry for is to talk to somebody about their business. Who do business owners talk to about their business? Maybe their spouse, right? When things are bad, they're not going to even tell their spouse things are bad. So who do they talk to about their business? They want to talk to their accountant. And so coming in as an advisor around the data, not around the tax, but around the data. Here's the trends we're seeing in your data. Here's what we want to look at and discuss about what we're seeing in your data. Like that is that transition to advisory, and clients are hungry to have these discussions. And the thing that I like to emphasize the most is they will pay. This is
Yeah.
where your margins are. This is where your profitability is. These are the things that the business owner will pay for.
Yeah. That's true. For good advice, people will pay premium, definitely, of course, me included, honestly. And so, we've talked on, advice for other firms, but what's your approach to value-based pricing for advisory services? How should firms even think about pricing differently, perhaps?
Yeah, this is a huge topic in the CAS space, as always, right? And so what, traditionally what a lot of firms have liked to do, because they don't want to get burned on spending more time, is they'll come in with hourly rates, right? And so when we think about what that hourly rate looks like, um, that's the reason you shouldn't do that is because you're going to come in with these clients and implement technology. You're going to maybe push that work down or maybe offshore, right? And so you want to capture what that pricing looks like as a fixed fee out of the gate. Because then when you implement that technology and you push the work down, that margin is your gain, right? It's not necessarily the client's gain. So it's really, really important. But in order to do that, you really have to come in and do a prospect analysis in advance of sending proposals to anybody, in advance of giving them any type of fee structure. You should know everything about that client before engaging with them. So with that, then what you're ending up doing is you're creating such a clear, detailed scope of work that allows you to either put them into packages, which keeps clients within their boundaries, right? Call it bronze, silver, gold, whatever you want to call it. It's like, oh, you know what? You keep asking for the things that are in gold, and it sounds like we need to, upgrade you now to the gold. But then the multiple buckets of revenue that we talk about all the time, there's so many that we see that CAS practices um, don't capitalize on, right? Like onboarding, setting up the technology, the administrative pieces of that, the connectivity of the technology. That doesn't need to come out of your monthly fee. The transfer of knowledge, meeting with the clients. How do you guys do this? Why do you need this? Why do you do that? All of that doesn't need to come out of the monthly fee. So we literally have like a whole list of revenue buckets of what you need to identify within the prospect analysis that aligns with our pricing model and a statement of work, so that you are just capitalizing on all these revenue streams and not leaving money on the table.
What I'd like to add is this is hard for firms. This is really hard for someone building a CAS practice. I feel like pricing is something we could spend a day on. And what I've seen firms successfully do is value price new clients. I have seen them really struggle with going back to current clients and move from hourly to value based. So my recommendation is just get started with value based pricing with those future clients until you get that down. And that is around that assessment, right? Is understanding like what their goals are, where their business is at, what their current processes, what their tech stack is. You need to do that assessment before you can turn around and say, hey, here's what I heard you're at, this is what I found and see in your books. Here's what I recommend when working with us. We're going to transform you to a tech stack that we believe in that's going to save everybody time because we want to get to that advisory. So the client might be calling saying, I want help with my books because they're a mess. And to Christine's point, you can say, great, we'll start there because that's what you're asking for, to start cleaning up your books and get you accurate books monthly. But guess what? That's not where we want to end. We have additional things we want to do with you. And we'll give you an example of those things like cash flow analysis or budgeting and forecasting. That's not what you're asking for today, but know that that's where we're going to get you in time when you're ready. So then you're planting the seed. Oh, wow, I call them to help me with my payroll and my bill pay and my books, but they do all that too. And so that you're planting the seed for all the more that you can do, but from a value based, like that's the value of what you're bringing. It's not an hourly discussion or engagement.
The other piece of this too, I just want to add is I feel like traditional, like the way that I grew up in a traditional public accounting firm too, is that we don't talk about our value enough to the client. So we say overdo your statement of work, explain what it is that you're going to do for them because we make it look too easy behind the scenes. And then it doesn't substantiate the fee all the time. But if they really truly understand what we're doing behind the scenes for them, then they're like, oh, that fee seems reasonable. So it's also just stating your value and conveying that in a formalized fashion that
But
you should.
constantly too. Constantly. Yeah.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah. Like I'm processing, because I've read a lot, about how to place the foundation, but I've never heard someone quite say, you should let your clients know more about the behind the scenes. And I think that's very important. There should be a good amount of transparency because what exactly are you paying for? And it should be clear, and people will then be a lot more inclined. And so, we're talking about foundation and everything like that. What's a common mistake or multiple mistakes that you see when firms attempt to add CAS services to their existing offerings? Where do they go wrong?
I think to restate what we stated too is they try to run it like a traditional CAS and tax practice. And so it's really thinking outside of the box. Yes, so that is in kind of like the change management underscoping. Yeah, that's it, right. Because if you don't access the client books prior to engagement and you underscope that, that's just going to be um, you know, revenue loss for the firm, for your team. It's just not providing why you really are in trying to, build this CAS growth at the rate that it can be grown. We're seeing double-digit growth. CPA.com does an amazing benchmark survey. And, if you haven't looked at that, I highly recommend you do that because it is double-digit growth year over year. But that underscoping obviously is not conducive to double-digit growth if you're not doing that properly. Inadequate training. I think, inadequate training with your CAS teams from both a technical standpoint and a software standpoint is really important, right? And so it's not putting cart before the horse, right? Because you have to make sure that your team's getting trained up in identifying tech champions. What is that? What is each team member going to bring to the table, their specializations, their industry expertise. So a lot of that training goes into play, because that then dictates, are you going to focus on some industry niches? And we find that the firms that can focus as much as they can on an industry niche are the most profitable.
Yeah, I would agree. I think in the bookkeeping space, firms, accountants tend to be generalists. And that, if the tax partner is driving it, they're like, oh, I just found this new client. I need you to help close the books. And they're generalists. The difference with CAS is you got to go deep. If you're giving business advice to a restaurant, it's very different advisory to a dentist, which is very different to a not-for-profit. And so you want to go deep and being able to look at the trends of the data. So the training of the staff, obviously, having them be able to go deep by industry. But I also think the training of the staff for hearing the continuous opportunities for CAS. Because your staff are the ones that are talking to the client all day long. The person who's paying your bills, the person who's doing your payroll, the person who's doing your expenses is a person you're talking to every single week, every single month. And having those people trained here for the advisory opportunities, because they'll call and they'll have discussions, the client's asking questions, and having your talents trained to be like, ooh, that's something we can do for you that we're not engaged to do right now. But let's take this back and visit with what I'm hearing you say you need. These are additional services we can provide. And so there's so much in this advisory part of the practice, that, I mean, I hate to say mistakes because I think people are doing such a great job at building CAS, but I would call them challenges.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely multiple challenges when it comes to scaling anything within your accounting practice and things like that. And niching down for sure helps across all teams that you've got going on. And, touching on the mistakes and everything, maybe we should take a bit of a positive note of, can you share an example of a firm that you've worked with that made a successful transition? Were there any key takeaways that you noticed? What made it successful?
Yeah, I think that the first bullet on this one is really important, is that you have a dedicated CAS leader and you have a dedicated CAS team. And so more often what we're seeing is that, yep, they have a dedicated CAS team, because that's super important, because this is not a shared responsibility. This is a constant, monthly book of business. And so it just doesn't, it's not conducive to have that shared with any tax or audit people, because they also have their busy seasons. But what we find, though, is that a lot of firms don't have a dedicated CAS leader. And that is what's so important. And that CAS leader, depending on the size of your firm, may not at all be involved in any client billable work. It's really high level, strategic, and how to build the CAS practice, how to create that double digit growth, how to, keep everybody trained, training programs, all of the things that need to go into place. So and Deneen, I know you have some to add on just that.
Totally. Yeah. This is the number one thing I see with the success of building a CAS practice or not, is having that dedicated CAS leader. It's the number one for the success of the CAS practice. So when I talk to CAS teams that are struggling, oftentimes it's a tax partner that came over to also build CAS, or an audit person that came over to also build CAS, but they still have a book of business. You can't have one foot in another job and be able to successfully grow CAS. What you don't know, Christine, is I actually talked to somebody today at a firm where she's been at the firm for, I think she said 2 years, and she came in to build CAS, and she's got no book of business. She's got no billable hour, and she has made massive changes in the 2 years. And I was like, wow, I never hear that. So it's so
Right.
refreshing, right? That the firm has given her, and she's like, oh, I'm all about strategy. I'm all about strategy. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so refreshing, because it is so important. And right now it's kind of rare.
Yeah. Yeah. That is refreshing. That's awesome.
Mhm.
I agree. Yeah, no.
Yep. We talk about like launching, yeah, pilot advisory bundle. This is trying to take a firm that has a traditional account bookkeeping write-up practice and just say, how can we get in front of the existing clients that we have to show them how different this is, right? If you want to come into it at a low cost or whatever cost you want to say, it's and as you have an industry niche, it's like, we're doing this for this other client. And we just wanted to show you kind of an example. Is this something that you might be interested in? Because a lot of times what happens is that your clients don't even know that you offer these services, right? And so unless you're getting in front of them saying, hey, this is what we're doing now, they don't know, right? And they might just not even be unhappy, but end up switching firms because they don't know that you offer services that another firm is approaching them with. Um, this embed daily stand-ups too, that's really just designed around making sure that the CAS, dedicated CAS group is coming together on a daily, weekly basis, whether you have offshore teams, onshore teams, just collectively, and how you're just designing your CAS team everybody's learning every day. It flows, the workload's being disseminated equally, or the workflow's being disseminated in fashions where there are certain people that have certain levels of expertise that you're bringing in on certain clients, even if they don't even have any presence with the client. It's like, you know what, so and so knows this a lot. We're going to bring them in, but they're not responsible for the client and they're not engaging in any meetings or communication with them.
Yeah, I think it's the best way to upskill the talent too. When they sit in and listen to others, the firms that are expert, they bring that back to their other clients too. So it's a great way to upskill.
Mhm. Yeah, this is why, constantly learning and growing and taking knowledge from anywhere, not anywhere that you can grab it, obviously from the professionals, is a major key in success. And, with success, what or how do technology tools support or perhaps even challenge, if some of them do, the shift to a scalable CAS practice?
Yeah, this is a huge one. And so again, not to say it 5 times, but the way that traditional firms are set up with audit and tax is they don't really understand what it means to bring in the technology piece into CAS because the tech stack is substantial, right? You can have 15, 20 different products within your CAS tech stack. And that is hard for firms to wrap their heads around because, with audit tax, they're using the same software. And it's like, since I started 30 years ago, is the same software that they're using now. And so they just don't understand why do we need all of these things? And why do we, so when you're working with IT, internal legal, it's really a challenge to work that thought process of how different it is within CAS. And that's that's a big piece for firms. And it's makes firms slow to adopt and slow to, implement technology because they can't move fast enough if that traditional mindset doesn't shift a little bit.
I
So
just want to
that's
touch that real quickly because I had dinner last year with the cast leader and she was complaining to me. She's like, she's very tech savvy. She wants to grow at the rate of technology, not at the rate of humans.
Mm.
She would much rather throw tech at something than a person. And I think the traditional firm is used to headcount, right? Oh, you need to hire another person. You can hire another person. She's like, I don't want to hire another person. I want to bring in more tech. I want to automate, automate, automate. And my tech person challenges me. And the tech person at the firm is also always like, why are you asking for all this technology in CAS? The audit partner is not asking for new tech. The tax partner isn't asking for new tech. So it's just like they get it's hard to grow at the rate of tech in CAS, which is what we highly recommend because it's just not the norm for a firm. Their tax and audit are using the same, CCH, Thomson Reuters, and And so this is just, that's the big difference.
And I do want to stay on this page for a second, this slide for a second, because there's a lot here, right? The support trust, that's huge, right? When we talked about aligning incentives, and it's not just the budgeted billable hours, they need to trust that the technology that they're implementing, that the firm's going to protect them. And when I say that, what I would tell my team was work yourself out of a job and trust me that you won't, right? Because you should, their incentives were how many new clients did you take on? And I would say, I'm not asking you to work more or more hours or longer. I'm asking you to create those efficiencies so that you can see other clients, take on new clients, and enjoy that aspect of CAS because that's the funnest part. But that support and trust really needs to be established from leadership for CAS teams. And not that it's not for all teams, but again, I just feel it's so different for CAS. The challenges too with this is not to overwhelm teams, right? Because when you talk about all of the tech stack that you can bring to the table, like, and that's what we see, doing the workshops with CPA.com for all those years. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me all those years is that firms seemed overwhelmed with tech. They didn't have a tech champion. And I would tell them, if you don't have a tech champion, unfortunately, it's going to be you. But a lot of the products have really great support, but that is a challenge, right? And so now it's just like prioritize what you need. Here are, the top 5 or 6 things that you need. And, how are you creating those efficiencies? In addition to that, you have software that we call like secret sauce software that you are utilizing for a firm that they don't know you're utilizing. They don't need to know how you're doing the work behind the scenes. And you did not ask for this, Elizabeth, but even like with Synder as a plug right here, how you could use some of you guys offer so much within your software product, but there are pieces of it that are just, the journal entry imports, just different things that you can do with your software that the clients don't need to know that's what you're doing, right? And so, but I will say that with the caveat of making sure that you are protected from and mitigating risk with language to be able to set up software and connect to their data in that secret sauce kind of mentality, but you have the language in your engagement letter that covers you for that, because that's a really big piece too. And then the standardized solution, I think this is really important because the way that I started and the way that we see a lot of firms work is that they just adopt whatever the client has. And that just doesn't allow your team to be an expert at anything. And so, yes, can we navigate? Yes, can we, poke and find our way around? Absolutely. But we are not experts. And that's not, the value that we bring to the table. So that standardized solution, whatever that is, that standard tech stack, but it has to be a standard GL platform, right? And if you have a small platform, you have a larger platform, as an example, if you're using QBO or Zero, whatever that looks like, you still have to have another platform that's going to grow with your clients. Now, and there's so many out there, and there's so many vendors out there, but you just want to make sure that you're training and investing in the training in your team to get them certified, the implementation, the conversions. That's massive, right? Because if you want to grow with your client, you need to know the larger ERP systems, but you need to know how to implement and convert as your practice starts to grow as well. So I think that there's a lot with technology, and there's so many rabbit holes on just this one slide that we could spend an hour on as well. But it's tech that drives and is the core, aside from the people, tech is the core of building CAS.
Yeah. While you're talking, I'm thinking about a firm who was sharing with me that they had a proposal out to a very large client. It was a property management client that had lots of different properties, and that business could not keep a controller or a CFO or bookkeepers. They kept quitting because it was a hot mess, and they had lots of different properties, and so there's a lot of moving pieces. And so the company was starting to look to outsource it. They wanted to outsource it rather than hire an internal. And so when she positioned herself as that that CAS practice, she came in and said, "You are a hot mess. I'm not taking over your mess. So I'm going to transition you to my tech stack with my people and my processes because I know what's best." And she got pushback from the business owner. No, 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 I want you to do it my way with my tech, with my GL, with my stuff. And she's like, because it's not working. That's why you can't keep anybody. So if you're going to work with me, we have to do it on the tech that I am comfortable with, my team is comfortable with, and I know is 10 times better than what you have now. And this person kept pushing back on her, and she's like, "Listen, if you want me to take over your mess, I'm going to be extremely expensive because I'm going to have to spend my time customizing towards you versus it's more reasonable if you let me put you on my tech stack that I know is going to save everybody a ton of time." So I think firms are nervous to tell customers that in order to use us as your outsourced provider, you have to use my tech. So a lot of them are like, "Oh, we'll use your tech." That does not create efficiencies. That does not create scalability, nor does that create comfort for your team. So you kind of have to protect your team too, to not just do it the way the client does it. Wrong. Not wrong, but messy.
Yeah,
Agreed.
it's that age-old saying, where people are always like, "Oh, the customer's always right." Not technically, no.
Not when it
Right.
comes to efficiently building a CAS practice. Yeah, or helping with outsourcing. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Technology, it's everywhere in our lives right now for sure. But it can be a hindrance sometimes, but it can be, an awesome tool to get you started. Um, so what kind of talent, team structure, or upskilling is, required to truly deliver advisory value?
Yeah, we have been talking about this number one bullet a lot lately. So, working with firms, coming in and assessing their team. So we come in and we can do a full team assessment. But what we're trying to help firms identify is, who who should you be investing in training? Because there's some people that are like, you know what, I'm comfortable. Like I'm good. I don't want to, move up. I'm good where I'm at. That's not what I want. And so it's like, okay, are you sure you're good? And we're not going to push you to, to learn more and upskill you. But this exposure experience is also has become really prevalent, especially in the last couple of months as we've been working with firms is, do they have the expertise and the experience to do what they're doing? They may or may not. And a lot of these CAS leaders are like, this manager, this team, they're just not, they're not helping me with some of this work. But then when we start asking, but have they had exposure? Have they been invited into the room, into the calls, and so what are we really bringing in the seniors, the managers into those higher level advisory conversations and meetings? And we can all do so much better at that because that gap that we find is pretty significant. But if they don't hear that, I heard it, for 8 years, with my tax and audit partners. So if you're not creating a space for them to come in and really hear the conversation, hear the advisory, hear what you're saying, what the clients are asking, and you do that over a long course of time, it's hard to have an expectation that they should be taking over and have all of that. The tech training, we talked about that too. You have to have technical training, you have to have software training. The hybrid pods, I really like this concept, and I know I touched on it on a couple slides ago, but as an example, I'll just give you an example. Like we had somebody within our team that was amazing at revenue recognition and building out these Excel files and pivots and bringing in the labor costs and all of that. Well, if they're so good at that, we don't need to reteach that to somebody else. We just would assign those tasks to that person. And so that just played out really well for our margins too, our efficiencies. It was awesome. And the team loved that. Um, the upskilling focus, again, we talked about that too. And again, when you start talking about transitioning from bookkeeping and right up to advisory, it's really just that start small. It doesn't have to feel so overwhelming. It doesn't have to be at that CFO level that everybody thinks it has to be at. You can bring a lot to the table from advisory in a small way and starting small. And I always ask my clients too is, define what you think advisory is, define what you think a CFO is, and you'll be really surprised at what they're really looking for. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's easy. Or, it's going to be at a higher level because you get into the higher level advisory that CAS is really lends well to is to the mergers and acquisitions, all of the things that, private equity companies that are acquiring different companies. So a lot of that plays in, but upskilling enough, but starting out small and then having the team with the expertise. And then clear career pathways. And this is fun because as you are building CAS teams, you have the ability to be the leaders, the partners, in that in most firms because it's a brand new business line or it's something that they're newly designing rather than being, in line behind X number of tax and audit managers, directors that are trying to get to partners or trying to get to directors or trying to get to managers. And I do want to say this here real quick though, too, is knowing that the CAS practices are manager heavy, right? Because the technology is doing a lot of that lower level work. The offshoring, and it's not that you don't still have staff accountants, in that lower level of person that working on these clients. It's just not as large in the comparison to the number of managers that you're going to end up having.
So while you're talking, Christine, again, the conversation I had this morning with the CAS leader that has spent 2 years on strategizing and transforming their whole practice, the thing that she told me today is that her team has capacity because she's shifted so much of this to tech. And so her focus for her team this year is training and
Right.
upskilling to advisory. And I'm like, oh, it was again so refreshing to talk to her because that's not what we hear. We hear so many of the CAS teams are like drowning in that, that transactional work that they can't get to the advisory. But here they brought in somebody to strategically push the work to the tech to have now she wants to, and all of her people are ready and capable of being promoted and elevated, which is why, a lot of the stuff we're doing at Infinite Ties, like she was like, I need this. This is what I'm looking for, right? My people, we create capacity and my people are ready. And so again, it's not the norm, but it's just a picture of it's happening. There are firms making the shift that are successfully able to free up their people to then have the time to train. But it's training on the tech, training on how to become advisory.
Mhm. Yeah, training extremely important for sure. So with that being said, how do you personally coach teams to go from task-based compliance to more consultative, strategic client confrontations? What's that shift that they need to make?
Mhm. This is a big question.
Yeah. We are big fans of role play, right? Like we love this. Come in, let's role play. What is that, present what a client's going to ask. And again, what we're teaching though too, and what firms need to teach their teams is what gets scary is you don't have to always have the answer. And then, because CAS teams are like, well, I don't want to talk to that client because what if they ask me something that I don't know? You don't have to have the answer. There are ways that you get out of that to say, I know the answer, but I really just want to check with my audit or my tax person so that it's not doesn't have any negative impacts on maybe your tax planning or something. So before I answer your question, can I just check on that and I'll get back to you. There are ways to do that. but it's also giving the CAS team the autonomy to have those conversations with clients too, and to have hard conversations with them as well. And what are those boundaries? Providing feedback, like this is so big. I mean, in any practice, but the feedback within CAS teams, because we are servicing clients every day, every week, that feedback needs to be instantaneous, right? Like something happened today, something happened yesterday. These are not just your semi-annual reviews or annual reviews. And the way that I would always come in, if we did something wrong, like every time somebody would come to me and like, this client's mad, I'm like, is it our fault? Because the way that I'm going to help you approach this is going to be different, whether it was our fault or not. But is how can we be better together? Right. And I'm like, you're not in trouble. We just need to figure out what the breakdown was and how do we not have that happen again? What do we change now that we're better together, that we can just learn from this and move forward? And so it was that trust, though, of that piece, and the shadow and teach, like that's huge too, because even as a manager, when I would get work, I would sit with my staff and seniors and say, this is how I review. This is how I review everything. And so then they started to understand the way that I was looking at the financials versus them being in the weeds as the doer looking at the financials. And I think that shadow teach is so important. And we've had to learn how to evolve that from being in an office all the time to more of that virtual environment as well.
Yeah. I mean, the shadow is super important because what I hear for some of the more junior, lower level staff is they're afraid. They're afraid to give bad business advice. They're very used to gathering the data and reporting on the data. They're not really used to talking about the data. And so they don't want to give bad business advice. So, in that shadowing and giving the feedback and the role playing, it's kind of showing them that you're not giving necessarily advice. You're just talking about the trends that you're seeing in the data. When you talk to the client about the trends you're seeing in the data, they know what to do. Oh my gosh, I didn't look at it this way. I know exactly what I need to do. So you're not telling them what to do. You're just talking about what you're seeing in their data. And then those business owners are like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what to do with this information. And so once they start experiencing that, I think they feel more comfortable with those consultative type conversations.
Definitely. Confidence, honestly, is key when it comes to so many different things,
Yeah.
for sure. And so, you know, how should firms introduce this evolution to longstanding clients who are used to that traditional model, which, you've touched on quite a lot. Um, you know, how does that work?
Yeah. And Deneen, I know this, like, it's the why, right? And so when we start looking at these topics on this slide too, if you want to just advance, it's lead with the why. And I know this is your favorite, Deneen, so I'm going to let you touch on the why.
Well, I think it's circling back to your current, like, no, listen, not everybody of your current clients is really ready for CAS. And so you have to look through your client base and you can select a client that maybe started with you 10 years ago at 1 million in revenue and is now at 3 million in revenue. Call the client and be like, wow, in the 10 years we've been working together, you've tripled in revenue. Like, why did that happen? Let's talk about your business. And what are your business goals? Do you want to double in revenue again? Do you know that we're the partner that can help you with that? There's all these additional services we would love to talk to you about that, we didn't start doing 10 years ago. And so it's really having those discussions with the client about what their goals are and revisiting those, traditional clients and having those conversations about them and their business and what their goals are to determine if, oh my gosh, like we can help you with those goals. That's a whole new way that we can start working together.
Yeah. And on this slide too, the communicate transparently, that goes all directions, right? Communicating with your team transparently, like keeping them in the CAS growth plan. They love that. Communicating with your clients transparently. It's those weekly meetings, right? It's we would have, for our mid-sized large clients, we would have weekly meetings. They might be 15 minutes, they might be an hour. But the more that you create that relationship and the more FaceTime and that advisory, that you know everything that's going on in their business, it's as if you're down the hall, right? That you're that trusted advisor to the point where your clients, like my clients we would build, cash flow models and forecasts. And they would say, Christine, when can we hire this person? And I'm like, let's throw it at the model and let me show you what that looks like. Right. And so that's how much trust they should have in you from the advisory standpoint. But that communication of setting those standard weekly meetings, just getting in front of them is so, so, so important to me.
Mhm. 100%. I said earlier confidence is key, but I'll change it. Confidence and communication are key.
I love it.
Definitely.
I love it.
Right. Yeah, and just to just close that out with technology too. Everyone's fearful of AI right now, but I'm like, AI is just helping us tell the story. They're helping us create those relationships. Now you have to take that and you have to create that, relationship if you don't have it. But those are the things that, whether it does or not. Right now, I'm just going to say those are the things that AI is not going to replace, is that human interaction relationship.
Mhm.
100%. I think clients look at the information firms send and they don't really understand it. And I don't think that's going to change. Even if AI makes it happen faster, they still need to talk to somebody about their business. And so it's telling the story with their data, being that true partner that's going to look at those trends, like Christine said, and said, are you ready to hire another salesperson? Let's see what that might look like. AI can't do that. I think it's humans that are still going to excel in that space.
Mhm. Yes, AI is here to help, not to overtake for sure. So thank you so much for leaving us, with that, you know, that thought and everything else. Really quickly, before we wrap up, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat. We do have a few minutes left in this webinar to answer them. And of course, if you would like to contact Christine or Deneen, their emails are available on screen for you. And I'm going to, for those who have stayed to the end, there is the $150 bonus. And this covers sync, insights, RevRex, anything else you're interested in that is equal to that amount. And to claim it, please, go to the link I've put in the chat and contact our sales team. But with the last 2 minutes we have, Denise and Christine, is there, one piece of advice, short and sweet that you can leave our audience with?
Go ahead, Denise. Let me start.
Well, I think I said it already. If you haven't started building a client advisory services practice, get started. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You are going to make mistakes along the way. I mean, Christine's the first person to tell you that she made a lot of mistakes, but what she likes to do is share her mistakes to help everybody get there faster. And if you have established a CAS practice, we know that you are feeling like you really challenged at getting to the next level. And so definitely contact us. Like, we got you. That's who we're swooping in to help, those people that have already started and they want to push and go to the next level. That's like sort of we hear you and we got you. That's who we're passionate about helping.
Yeah, and I would say that too. I think, and it's truly not a plug, but like what we're doing within our community is bringing CAS leaders together, bringing CAS managers together where they can talk and share what they're doing right and wrong too. It's not just us. It's just like, don't feel like you're on an island. Help and support and build your team in a way where they have groups of people that have done it, know how to, either have failed or are doing it successfully and can talk to each other. I think that that's really important. But like Deneen and I were going to say the same thing, which I knew we were going to say, is like, if you haven't started, you need to, because if you haven't started, you're already kind of behind that curve and you don't want to be behind. You want to be right, right with all of the CAS growth that firms are seeing nationally, because it's massive.
Mhm.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
100%. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And if you would like to contact Deneen and Christine, they are your experts. Go to them 100% for all your CAS needs and for all your technology needs and accounting needs. Please feel free to use the link in the chat. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Deneen and Christine, thank you once again so much. Have a great
Thanks.
day.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.